This is the Last Minute Blues Podcast with Donny, Alex, Jeremy, and Jeff Burton.
It is the Last Minute Blues Podcast. Donny Fandango, joined by Alex Ferrario from 101 ESPN, handling your pre- and post-game as well. Listen, I want to introduce JR, but when he boos himself, it makes me sad.
You want me to boo him instead then? Would that make it a little bit better?
Let's try it.
All right.
And from The Athletic, Jeremy Rutherford.
Boo.
Yeah, woo. I don't know, man.
No, that's still,
I don't think I love that either.
That hurt me a little bit. I love JR too much.
What's going on there, boys? We haven't seen everybody in a bit. Before you answer that, I got to tell you that the podcast is presented by Blue Note Roofing, siding, and gutters. Your St. Louis roofing experts. Visit BlueNoteRoofingSTL.com for a free inspection.
Right here, Donny.
Gentlemen, absolutely. Sharp Cap. What's going on? How we doing?
This is weird because typically the last, 4 episodes, we've had a fourth person here that we've been interviewing. It's nice to just have a little threesome right now.
You don't have to make it sexy. And also, too,
is this or is this not a sexy podcast?
You know, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I think that this might be one of the least sexy podcasts.
Two-thirds of this podcast is sexy, and I'll let the audience decide the 2/3.
Usually there's a smart person sitting in this chair, like a Joey or a Barrett.
And JR's like, I'm sitting in that chair today.
So you guys are like... You're jumping into it. I mean, this is when the season in earnest starts for you guys. And one of the questions in which that I have been thinking about over the course of the last week or so since training camp started was, when I go to a blues practice or a skate or something along those lines, I am just always, while I'm there, man, I'm just really honestly marveling at the skills of all of these guys. All right. I mean, even the worst blues player is able to do things that I could never even imagine, So when you are going there and when you're watching practice, what are you watching for, guys? Is there something that you could tell me, the lay person, that doesn't know necessarily the ins and outs like you guys do? If I'm going to the practice out at Centene, what's something in which that I can watch for? So that, as well as what are you goofballs watching for as well?
JR is watching his laptop for Twitter notifications to pop up to see what's going on there.
Yeah, there's a ton of things, Donny. I mean, and it's so intimate out there at Centene.
It's such a great thing. If you have ever been on the fence about it, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but they do it so well out there. And the way that I look at this is, when my oldest son, Benjamin, was little, he really liked sports, but it could only be for, small periods of time because he was a little kid. Well, man, when you have the ability to take him out to a free practice and watch the guy skate around and get sort of the feeling and the cold and all of that sort of thing, and you can be there for 15 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? If the kid starts going friggin' crazy, you can bug on out of there. Well, and then, with the other kiddos as well, it's just such a really neat thing to be able to experience and for free.
Well, and I'll put it in too before JR continues. What a crowd for those first 2 days of training camp. I mean, it was shoulder to shoulder. When they moved into that smaller rink, the typical one, I think it's the NHL one that they practice on. I mean, there was no room to even get in and move around. So fans obviously agree with what you're saying. Centene being intimate and getting to be out there for those practices.
Yeah, even if you're in the lower bowl for the games, you're a couple 100 feet away. Well, here you're 5-10 feet away.
Yeah.
I remember the other day a few guys came on the ice and the fans started to applaud, and one of them was Toropchenko. So one fan, from 20 feet away, yells Torpo, and he sticks his stick up there, and then there was a loud applause. But what do you watch? Alex can chime in too. I think that what I try to look for, a lot of it's drills, and you can't read a ton into drills except for work ethic. How hard are guys working in practice, even though it's just a drill, to do exactly what Jim Montgomery wants out of the drill. And a lot of the things that they do might look like, to us watching, okay, well, they're 2-on-1 up and down the ice, but this is a piece of what they want to see on the ice. So they're practicing this to install it into, part of their system. And that's why they're working on it. So you try to look for some of the things that they want to see in the games. And this is why they're working on it. The other thing is you can see, what I like to watch is, and I'll never forget the story, is Ryan O'Reilly dropped 100 pucks one day and just shot after shot after shot from this one particular place on the ice. And then later that night, scored a goal from that spot. Yep. And I said to myself, I watched him practice that 100 times this morning. So, those are things that you can then use in stories. Like, hey, I saw this 100 times this morning. So I think that if you have keen eye, and the fans, when they go out there, sometimes, they got a little one or a couple kids that they bring out there. You kind of have to watch them and make sure they're not.
You can't lock in.
Good luck
running off. But yeah, you go out there, you can definitely pick up on some things because you're so close.
I'll tell you the one that I always love watching, and it's Steve Otto face-off practice at the end. He always will. You get the centerman's over, and it's fascinating to me watching, because sometimes you can hear if there's not a lot of people in there, but it's fascinating to watch him work on the technical side of the face-off with these players, because you see that in game. You see them using nuances that Steve Ott's worked on, or waiting for the puck to be in the ideal spot, or how you pull it back to the centerman, and they'll go after one after one after one for a good 5 or 10 minutes. So to me, I find that really interesting. And then when they do power play work, I always watch that just to see where guys are set up, what they work on, because like JR mentioned, you're going to see that in the game, and one guy is set up for a one-timer, you see a goal happen, and it's like, they went through that drill on the power play.
And Donny, a couple days ago, it was kind of funny in practice. The two, I guess, squads were kind of competing against each other, and there was a whistle, and then there was a face-off, and one of the teams tried to change, so they got the tired guys off.
Sneak one through.
All of a sudden, you see the one, no, and they're banging the sticks on the ice. So it's pretty competitive.
Yeah, and that tells you right there that the vibes are pretty high, at least for a few days around training camp, which that's what we do now. We're vibe measurers at these practices. But, I mean, the guys definitely, from content day versus the first couple of days of training camp, it seems like they're in pretty good spirits about the season this year.
And do you see them, and I assume that this is a silly question, but do you see them, do you notice like sort of a change in them as it gets closer to the regular season? Are they kind of in go mode now? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because content day that we do for 101 ESPN, it's just us with the guys doing liners and stuff. That's more of the day-to-day off-season hockey player. And then the next day training camp opens and it's game mode for most of those guys. Now, some of the younger ones still are, they're still young and dumb, for lack of a better phrasing, because they have that openness to them. But like guys like Shen or Thomas, when the season starts, the training camp begins, oh man, they're locked in. Mm-hmm. It's like hockey mode immediately for those guys.
Yeah, I don't think you could watch the second practice of training camp and then watch the practice right before the home opener and notice a huge difference.
Okay,
they're going at it pretty hard. It's just kind of the vibe in there, tomorrow's opening night type thing. Yes, but you're watching on the ice, it's go time.
One of the things that I really enjoy doing as being a part of the Blues media list is that I get the pressers or the scrums that JR, that you're a part of. Alex, you're probably a part of them sometimes. After practice, after games, things. I love watching them. I love watching them because I also like to dissect what they're saying. But one of the things that's so striking to me in watching Jim Montgomery, whether it be in one of those pressers, whether it be on the ice with the team, there is just this, man, confidence is obviously what I'm looking for, but there is just, I just don't worry about our head coach.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it is just a guy that looks like he has a handle on every situation at every time. It seems like he's, a pretty even keel guy, even though I know we've seen him get fired up on the bench and all those types of things. But it just seems like we got a real good leader and table setter here. We knew that already, but I think it just reinforces it when you see him talking about the players, talking about St. Louis. I mean, he's just a really different. He's so good, you can kind of see why. There's just something a little bit different about him.
No, you nailed it. He's in such control of the information that he wants to give you, how he wants to deliver it. We've had coaches here in St. Louis over the years where you ask them a question and literally 3 minutes later, they're still talking, and we're talking about something that was completely different from the question. It's just kind of like diarrhea, word salad type thing. And Jim Montgomery, I noticed it right from the get-go. When he was assistant coach here, obviously he didn't do a lot of interviews, but he comes in, just well-seasoned, college level, spends some time in Boston, comes here. And so when you ask a question, Alex, this, he's going to give you 3, 4, 5 sentences, maybe. It's going to be direct. It's probably going to answer your question if he wants to, and it's going to make you go, oh, okay, yeah. And so I always joke around that I feel like he's a PR person's dream because he doesn't tell you stuff. He probably, there have been coaches over the years where I think John Davidson said at one time, he goes, man, Ken Hitchcock will build you a watch. I don't need my head coach building you a watch. So, telling you everything, every step, every process.
Well, and I'll tell you the other thing with Jim Montgomery too is watching the players on the ice that first day of training camp. And this is no disrespect to Drew Bannister, but the players that first day of camp when Jim Montgomery spoke, you saw all of their eyes locked onto him. Mm-hmm. And then you saw them take what he said into the drills and they put it into impact immediately. There was effort into it, to what JR was pointing out of like, how hard do you see these guys going in practice, to where when Drew Bannister did it the previous year in camp, you would just notice guys dispersing early from the scrums. And it's just a respect factor, right? Like, this is nothing against Drew Bannister. He hadn't had no NHL experience. But with Jim Montgomery, it's like people hear him and they're like, oh, that guy had the best record in Boston. That guy coached David Pastrnak. That guy coached to the second round with the Dallas Stars. That guy's been with the Blues. Like, there's just a respect factor, I feel like, when Jim Montgomery speaks, whether it's from the media or from the players. And that, Donnie's where the confidence comes from. It's like, you don't worry about it, because this dude has done it so many times. Yeah.
Also, too, and this is not important, but at the very beginning of the scrum yesterday, and you guys were talking about Taco Tuesday, right. And Jim Montgomery said he had like a new place or something, but he wouldn't talk about the place. Did you use your investigative reporting skills to find out what Mexican place he was talking about?
Who was to the right of me? I think it was Matt DeFranks ended up coming up with the name of the place, but I didn't catch it because Matt lives near the place. But yeah, just, you try to open the conversation with some, human interest.
Lighthearted stuff.
Yeah, we asked him about Taco Tuesday yesterday, so we're gonna have to get the name of that place. And
the name that was bandied about, is that how you would say it?
Bandied about? Yeah. Nailed it.
Was Soul Taco.
I heard somebody say that, but then I think that ended up not being
what the one. All right.
Jim Montgomery's got to be like a deep cuts taco place that nobody's heard of before.
But you know what, though? When we were interviewing him, when we had him on the podcast, we did a pizza bit.
Oh, yeah.
And he talks about how his in-laws loved emos, but that he had a spot, but then he wouldn't tell us what that spot was because he didn't want to get blown up.
That makes sense. If I'm Jim Montgomery, I don't need my spot, my pizza and taco spot being blown up by Blues fans. I want to go there.
Okay, well, that's fine, but I want to know. Okay, that's all right. All right, so guys, let's start kind of. We're getting close. I think for us anyway, we talked a little bit about as the summer went on, like, let's wait to talk about lines till we get closer to camp. Let's kind of wait because things can happen. Well, we're in the thick of it. You've seen the guys practicing, and JR, I even think that I heard you say in the scrum yesterday that it seems as though that the lines might be slowly sort of coming together. So guys, I want to know what you're seeing.
I don't know, because I was still thinking about the tacos when I asked the question.
Taco place. Is Taco Bell open right now?
I just saw Monty's mouth moving about the lines, and I was thinking,
tacos.
Just thinking about covering everything in queso.
No, I think we saw yesterday the lines get closer to what we're going to see on opening night, and you look at them and you kind of expect them with Buchnevich and Thomas and Snuggerud, but then we saw on that second line, we saw Holloway, and we saw Suter, and we saw Jordan Kyrou, and so that was a kind of a change from maybe what a lot of us, including myself, are expecting, because we think Braden Shen would be on that second line in the middle. They had the success last year. Why not at least try it out at the start? And Jim Montgomery, I thought, had a good answer. Like we said, few sentences, and he told us that, hey, we know what Shen can do on that line. Let's see what Suter can do. He likes the player, obviously. And, I think that Suter and Shen, they're going to play middle six center, one of them, and the other guy is going to be on the third line, and they could flip throughout the year depending on the success of the line or what the Blues want their lineup to look like. I mean, if you have a Neighbors and a Shen on a third line, that's pretty deep, and those guys have had experience together.
Well, and that's just for me, like, we're less than a week in. I look at this as there's one line that's written in pen that is going to be together once the season starts up, and it's Buchnevich, Thomas, and Snuggerud. Every other line has a question mark. Now, to JR's point, the two lines in the middle, the question mark is it Shen or is it Suter? And I think you're going to see that a lot.
And I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to make sure that we're clear, like, that this isn't necessarily like a bad question mark.
No. This is just who works better with the players. Like, Hitch used to always go off of pairs. Berube did that as well. I think Holloway and Kyrou are your pair. It's just who's the center that makes those two better. But then there's probably another question mark on that third line, and it's the biggest question mark of who's going to fit in on that wing. And then you've got a question mark on the fourth line, who plays with Walker and Toropchenko. There's a lot of guys that fill into those because you've got Bukestad, you've got Schenn, you've got Suter, but who's that third line wing, I think, is probably the biggest competition. And then who slots down to that fourth line. But that's the part that I find interesting. It's like this team is deep, but there's still a lot of question marks, but those question marks are just chemistry of who's going to work best with Holloway and Kyrou, who's going to work on that line with Neighbors and whomever the center is, and who brings that Radek-Faksa vibe to the fourth line with Walker and Toropchenko.
Yeah, here's a point I want to make about who is the second line center is a couple years ago, people were down on Schenn. The production wasn't there. He didn't do much. And then all of a sudden he plays with Holloway and Kyrou and he looks great. And it's like, okay, well, he didn't start to go downhill and then all of a sudden climb back uphill. He was playing with a couple really good wingers. And for a couple years there, guys, he didn't have those wingers, at least. He had Kyrou, but Kyrou was minus 38.
And
right?
Kyrou would always go back and forth to the top line with Thomas, back to Schenn. There was never consistency.
Yeah, so I'm just saying this, if you have Schenn in the middle to start out and you can get the most out of Braden Schenn with the two wingers that you have with him, that might be the way to go. Like maybe you like Suter on that second line, but you push Schenn down and now he's got a Joseph to his right instead of a Kyrou. Mm-hmm. And then maybe you're not getting the most out of Braden Schenn. So I guess that's what I'm saying is they'll evaluate all that stuff as they head into
and Suter's kind of the unknown. So, because we haven't even seen him in a preseason game yet. So I'll be fascinated to see how he works. He could be somebody that brings the best out of a third line grouping, whether it's Bukestad or Joseph or Jake Neighbors is probably going to be that third line center's wing. He might bring the best out of that guy, which adds more to the depth conversation we've been talking about.
Let's take a break. More of the Last Minute Blues podcast coming up in just a second. All right, so a couple here questions. A couple of the guys that seem to be, on that sort of bubble continue to seem to be the guys that we're talking about on the bubble. As far as Joseph, as far as Texier, are any of these guys that you see making inroads into making this team? Are these guys legitimately fighting to be a Blue at the end of camp sort of thing? I feel like, are we running out of runway with Matthew, Joseph, and Texier as far as kind of knowing what they are? Can you guys kind of speak to that a little bit?
I did this the other day on the show, and I think I've done this with Jared multiple times, so he's probably sick of hearing it. And I'm going to try and not do this Italian-wise where my hands do all the talking.
Well, that's the best part of the video podcast.
I guess that's true. The Italian comes out in me in here. But the way I look at this is there's two roster spots that are being fought for on this team. And if you want to believe that Oscar Sundqvist is a 12th forward or probably a 13th forward, you're fighting for two spots. And I think in that competition, prior to those first couple of preseason games, you had 9 guys. You had Dvorsky, Stenberg, Carbonneau, Joseph, Texier, Lucic, and then Kaskamaki and Alexandrov. And I think when you saw those line combinations yesterday, at least for me, which I read into stuff way too much, some of those guys dropped off, and some of this is just the roster game. I think this competition has come down to Joseph, Texier, Lucic, and Carbonneau, because Dvorsky and Stenberg don't need waivers, and you're probably looking at it as, you know what, they might need a little bit more seasoning in the AHL, which isn't a bad thing. So then it's Joseph, who I thought was probably the best of this bunch in one preseason game, Texier, who played here last year, Lucic, who's on that PTO, who by all accounts sounds like the Blues really want him to make the team, and Carbonneau, who's probably been the most offensively gifted in camp. To me, those 4 guys are ahead of the rest, and it just comes down to, out of those 4, which to make the roster, because they're only going to carry 14 forwards.
Yeah, and the way I would boil that down, and that's well said, is it comes down to the 2 spots. And Dvorsky doesn't look like he's going to make this team out of camp.
Yeah.
Like Alex said, he can go down. He could, but I think we'll see him later on. Lucic, we've touched on him. I don't know that he's looked great. I realize it's the preseason. It's hard for a 37-year-old guy to make an impact in preseason. I didn't think he did much in the Columbus game. I think that now with the injury, he tweaked the groin yesterday.
Yeah.
How long does that last? And does it open the Blues' mind to, is this guy going to be injury prone, with what he's been through the past couple of years, not being in the league. And so to me, if they want Lucic to be on the team because they know once the season starts, he can be a contributor, then they're going to put him on the team. So he might make it regardless of what we think he looks like in the preseason. But to me, it's going to come down to Texier and Joseph, and they're under contract. They're NHL players. You know that they are good depth, whether you like them in the starting lineup or not. Mm-hmm. They can be a 13th and 14th forward if you want them. I'm not saying it's perfect. Joseph has played well enough in the preseason so far that I don't think you would not want him in the lineup. Mm-hmm. So I think that if you have a lineup of, let's just say, like Neighbors on the left, Suter in the middle, Joseph on the right, he gets a chance. If Joseph doesn't play consistently, then he's out. Maybe Texier pops in or whomever.
Or they just put Bukestad up there.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of a Bukestad.
Bukestad goes to third line right wing, and then they reconfigure, the fourth line, whether it's Walker or Sundqvist in the middle. Mm-hmm. So to me, it's shaping up that Texier and Joseph are going to get those last two spots, with the caveat that if they want Lucic on the roster, then one of those guys is going to have to get sent out.
Can I give you guys a conspiracy theory that I have?
Ooh,
I like tinfoil. Now tell me how crazy this is, or tell me how right I am. I'd like to hear the latter. So the roster maneuvering is the biggest part here. The guys that have to do waivers are Joseph and Texier, and you don't want to lose them because if you lose one, that hurts your depth. Dvorsky and Stenberg can go through. So how do you make this work? And let's say Carbonneau just continues to be one of the best players and you'd like to give it a 9-game trial. What if the Blues look at this and say, well, what if we don't have to lose both of those guys to keep a Lucic, to keep a Carbonneau on this roster? What if we look at Milan Lucic and say, look, we want Carbonneau to play 9 games to see what it looks like. Might not go well. He might be going back to juniors. That's probably the more likely scenario. So let's let Carbonneau go for 9 games. We want you to get some conditioning in. So what if we sign you to a contract and you start in Springfield? And by the time you get a couple of games under your belt in Springfield, you've got some conditioning. Carbonneau looks good, but he's going to go back to junior so he can get more development there. But he got a taste of the NHL. We'll bring you back up, and Carbonneau can play 9 games. Lucic gets to go to the minors, comes back to the NHL, and now you get a more seasoned, or at least more conditioned Milan Lucic to pro games. You still have one or both of Joseph and Texier if you can sneak one through waivers, and Carbonneau plays the first 9 games of the season.
Yeah, I can see where you're going with that.
Donny looks like that Zach Galifianakis part in The Hangover, where there's 18,000 equations coming at him.
I think I figured it out, but JR, go ahead.
I need him to break it down better.
No, it's definitely a conspiracy. But darn it. I can see where you're going. I just feel like this. I feel like, we were told that Milan Lucic is in the best shape of his life, granted 37 years old.
I tell my wife that every morning when I wake up.
But if he's not conditioned ready to go now, what's a couple weeks in Springfield going to do for one? And two, Carbonneau has played well enough to, potentially earn a 9-game trial. But I think if their plan is to have him in junior this year, a few more games could help him. He can go back to junior with that experience. But I feel like Doug has done this over the years, and this is what I believe helps a player too, just my own opinion, is that, send him down there, let him start the season with the team, let him get his foundation set and have a good junior year, as opposed to, you have to push Lucic to the side. Now he's not part of the team. Is he getting any better by playing a couple of weeks with, Springfield? And then now is Carbonneau the 3 games or 4 games, maybe gets all 9 of them. How much is that going to help him? I think Carbonneau's got a bright future. I'm just saying, if he's 19 years old, those guys are tough to be able to count on long term. Yeah. And I think that if you send him back to his junior team and he has a great year, he's going to come back, a better player for what he's been through, having experienced camp and so on and so forth.
Let's take another break, come back. We'll finish up another segment of the Last Minute Blues podcast on the way. So in listening to the scrum yesterday with Jim Montgomery, it kind of almost sounded like he was describing Pius Suter as almost a Radek Faksa type player, as far as, face-offs and covering his man and all of those kinds of things. But maybe a better version thereof. Are you guys is Suter sort of taking that Radek Faksa spot, but maybe just a little bit better, maybe?
A little more offensive talent, I would say. Like,
Okay.
I think when I hear Faksa and Suter, those two, to me, are two different players because Faksa always played like he was pissed off. And I don't know if Suter is that. Okay. Like, Faksa was the prototypical fourth-line center, to where, to me, Suter's got more offensive upside. Okay. Like, Suter, and I agree with what you're saying, Donny, in terms of the face-off, because Faksa was, 57% last year?
58%, and Suter's like a 43.
Yeah, and like last year, they would put Faksa out there on a face-off in the defensive zone with Robert Thomas, because if one got the boot, well, then I'm going to win the face-off with my second guy, and as soon as the team took the face-off, Faksa would jump off the ice, Winger would jump back on. I can see them doing that with Suter. Like, I could see them putting him out there on the ice to win a face-off and then jumping off so that the winger can come back out. What I don't see Suter, and I don't know how much he was used in the penalty kill in Vancouver.
A lot.
Was he really?
Big part of it, yeah.
I don't know if he'll be used in the same light as Radek Faksa, but if he's a penalty killer, then that's where you're going to see him used. Faksa was just that identity in terms of he played with that physicality that would set the tone. I don't know if I view that with Suter. Everything I've heard about him is that he's a slower skater. He doesn't have the flashiest moves, and he's not the most skilled guy on the ice. But what he does is he's always around the net, and he's always in the perfect place, and he makes his line mates better.
Yeah, I think I might have told you guys, but the Thomas Drancy, Vancouver Canucks athletic writer, told me a couple weeks ago that he's short, he is slow, and he can't win a faceoff.
Yes.
And sometimes he's the best player on the ice. and that's what we talked to Jim Montgomery about yesterday. Like, he just knows how to play the game. He's got good hockey sense. But yeah, he was a big member of Vancouver's PK, which was one of the top PK units in the league. And yesterday the Blues ran the PK forwards, and he was among the top.
So you're going to get the penalty kill. You're going to get more offense than what Radek Faksa provided, but I don't think you'll get the same type of intensity that Radek Faksa had. Suter seems like Suter seems like he's just kind of an even keel guy when he's on the ice, which is what you want from a centerman that you hopes to put up points.
Is there like another like roster cut down day where they have to, trim the roster from training camp? Is there another one of those type
things
coming up?
Yeah, and they're different for every NHL team. They kind of base it on their schedule. The Blues, it's interesting. I haven't seen a preseason schedule like this where you play a couple games and then you got basically a week off.
Yeah, and then you play the final four in a 7-day stretch.
Yeah, it's bang, bang. So to answer your question, could there be cuts tomorrow? I suppose, you're giving guys a couple extra practices, but, usually they come after games. So you play games here at the end of the week and then you might see some more.
And they've got 4 games left with one being on the road, which typically those home games are the ones that they play more of their veteran players so they don't have to travel. My guess is you're going to see a lot of the AHL guys play in that final game against the Blackhawks when they're on the road. But I mean, typically you get down to one big group by the final 3 games, because now is the time that the teams like to start to see what an NHL line looks like, so you can start to build up that chemistry in games rather than what those first 2 were, where you saw Stenberg playing with Holloway or Dvorsky playing with Carbonneau. Like, that's the stuff you see in those first couple of preseason games.
I want to ask this really quick before I move on to a couple of things around the NHL. I want to make sure that Blues fans have the proper head on their shoulders when it comes to young Dvorsky.
The answer is no.
I was going to say, they don't.
But I mean, really, this is still just a part of dude's development process, right? Like, this is not truly out of the ordinary. This young man is still 21 years old, right? Like, don't freak out. It's going to be all right. He's still going to be a player. He's just not there yet.
Yeah. So here's the thing, though, is sometimes these players take off and become who you think they
Jimmy
are.
Snuggerud.
A Jimmy Snuggerud. And we still don't know quite yet, but you're right. David Perron, Zach Bolduc, is he going to become the player that, and he does, right? But then there's also Klim Kostins, right? Yeah. So there's players who, just be patient. He's developing. He'll be fine. And then,
he goes back to the KHL twice to try and develop.
Then he's gone. So, Dmitry Ashkin maybe didn't turn into player that everybody hoped. So there are examples of guys like Kostin that lead to some caution.
Sure.
Especially when you draft a guy 10th overall like Dvorsky. It's like you can't miss on that. Yeah. Right? The Blues haven't had a lot of those types of picks, and so you hope you can. But the thing with him is the one knock that the evaluators have is the skating, the foot speed, the pace, and you have to have that in today's NHL. So can you develop that by coming up and getting these camps and then going down to Springfield? The thing that I would lean on if I were a Blues fan is the success he's had in the American Hockey League, and he's still 19 years old. And if the Blues were in some sort of like full-on rebuild, he would be up here playing.
Right.
It's just that they want to be competitive, and so that's why you go out and get a Suter and a Bukestad and those guys. Like, you wouldn't have went out and got Suter if you were going to lean on Dvorsky and see what he's got.
And you could slow play it there too, to where like they've used him on the wing a couple of times in training camp and preseason. Why? Because, well, work on the other side of his game and let the centerman develop, because he's got 2 years to do it. Here's the thing that I've seen the most of Blues fans maybe overreacting a bit. Because Justin Carbonneau has looked so good in his first couple of preseason games, people are like, oh, well, Carbonneau's developing faster than Dvorsky. That means Dvorsky's a bust. I don't look at that way at all. Like, Carbonneau has been playing in juniors hockey for the last 4 years. Like, the last 2 years, I think he's put up north of 30 goals. That was at a 17-year-old and an 18-year-old. When Dvorsky was 16 and 17 years old, he was played in Sweden 5 minutes a night on the bottom line. Like, he hasn't played in juniors or pro hockey as long as like a Carbonneau has been playing there. So the reason it might look faster for a Carbonneau is he's been playing this brand of hockey. Dvorsky's had to adapt to a certain role to play in pro-level Sweden hockey because he was so young. So you're seeing the slow play happen, but I think this is normal, and it's also normal for centermen to take a little bit longer because, as Montgomery said a few days ago, man, centermen have so much more to worry about on the ice than just floating around and looking for an opportunity to score.
And that's the key. If Dvorsky were a right winger and he came up a right winger and, he showed up at camp, and I'm not saying he looked like Carbonneau looks like right now, but, he'd probably look better and people would be more excited. But, the Blues see his future as a center, at least they do for now.
And Blues fans see it as a second line center.
Yeah. They got high expectations, second line center. And so when, a 19-year-old isn't becoming the center, I don't think people should freak out about that yet. So Carbonneau's look great. Like Alex said, he's played a lot more junior hockey, North American hockey. We're talking smaller ice. And, will Dvorsky get there? Yeah, it looks like it, but that's like Jim Montgomery said, center in the Blues system is a hard position to play.
One more on development just there, Donny. I think it's actually good for the Blues if Dvorsky starts the season in the AHL, because it's got the drive there. And I'll tell you, from having conversations, which I know you've had, JR, with Dvorsky, guy has the right head on his shoulder. Like, he is a motivated, slightly aggravated that he doesn't have this chance yet. He wants to get to the NHL. That's what I would prefer, rather than just I'm not here, so I'll go to the AHL again.
He's hungry for it.
Yeah.
Obviously, as a Blues fan, I have many reasons to be optimistic.
Many.
I have many reasons to be happy as I am going into the 2025-2026 hockey season. I feel great. I also am not a Minnesota Wild fan.
Amen to that.
Whoa, buddy. If you are a Minnesota Wild fan, how are you not in full-on complete freakout mode right now with what is going on with Kaprizov the Thrill? Like, first of all, do you guys see him signing in Minnesota? Second of all, if you don't, where do you see him maybe potentially going? And what kind of dough is this guy looking for? Because by the time it's all said and done, guys, he might be the highest paid player in the league, more so than Draisaitl, more so than McDavid. What? I love that player. I think he's great, but he should not be the highest paid player.
I was just picturing Donny hosting the Minnesota Wild.
Oh my gosh!
Last minute Wild podcast.
Next time, Minnesota's...
I'd be doing it under a desk. I would be visibly upset.
Next time Minnesota's here, we need to have Russo come in and do one with him and just see how they interact with each other.
Well, first of all, when you see the headline, turns down the deal, $16 million a year, you're just like right? You're just like, holy bejeez. Like, they waited for that guy for 4 or 5 years to come. He finally comes. He becomes the star, face of the franchise, and now, he turns down the contract. The one thing, I just think that, A, it's negotiations, right? B, the CBA is changing. Now you can't, you can do 8 years. Next year you can't, right? So things are changing a little bit. The other thing is, and I don't know why more of these superstars weren't doing it years ago, is with the cap climbing, take the shorter term deal.
Bingo.
Take 4 years, 5 years at X, because you're going to get a lot. and then the contract's up 4 or 5 years. Now the cap's up at 117, and now you're going to make more. Now you have to run the risk of injury, but you made a lot of dough on that 5-year deal. And so I don't know all the particulars. I don't think anybody does. But if you turn down an 8-year deal, and we know why the Wild would want to sign him to an 8-year deal, right? They want to keep him in the fold for
as long as they can.
Time. It might be because he wants to talk a shorter term deal and make the 6. It could be a lot of things, So I don't think him turning down. I didn't view him turning down the deal as I didn't want to be in Minnesota. It's just they're not there yet with the talks.
And I think it's funny in the way that responsible hockey fan looks at it, and an emotional hockey fan looks at it.
And you're not even a Minnesota fan.
No, and I'm not even. As a matter of fact, I hate the Wild. I do not like the Wild at all. I'm super stoked they have a hockey team. They absolutely should. I'm glad they're in our division. All of those kinds of things. But I got no love for them. But man, just the fan in me, man, the panic button.
It's going to be, and I mean, you should have it, because if Kaprizov doesn't sign, and I don't know why you would want to do anything else, because Minnesota's basically said, write the name, we'll put it down, you're going to be here. But if I'm Kaprizov, cool, I want the most money possible, and I want to see what some of these other guys get, because Eichel's up, Marner just signed, McDavid's going to sign. I want to see what some of these guys get before I go to you. But if I'm Minnesota, on one hand, I can't really panic because you've told me you're going to get him signed. But on the other, if Kaprizov doesn't, my team's back to a rebuild. I mean, because you're not going to trade him. You don't trade Kaprizov, even if you don't think you're going to be able to re-sign him. And if he walks, well, it doesn't matter, because now your team is in shambles. Regardless of what you've done, that's the guy that you have built this team around.
Okay, but so seriously, though, if you are getting close to the trade deadline and you're not having productive discussions with Kaprizov and his team, you still hang on to him. You don't try to trade him at the deadline and at least get.
I think it depends on where you're at in the standings.
Okay.
If you're, the playoffs are most important.
Yes. Sorry.
Now, if I'm the third worst team in the Western Conference and it looks like this is not going to happen, then maybe. But I believe Kaprizov's got a no-trade clause or maybe a no-move clause, so he determines where he wants to go, which means your return is going to be less than what you would get normally trying to trade a Kaprizov.
Yeah, he would have control over. I would still try to figure out a way to trade him, because if 1 year making the playoffs, let's say you're the Wild, you go a round or two, is not worth whatever you could get for Kaprizov, even if he controlled the cards. And listen,
even if it's only a first-round pick coming back in return,
but isn't that better than nothing?
Better than 2 months.
You're talking about a 32nd overall pick, maybe, if he goes to a team that wins the cup.
Yeah, no, but I would feel that the package would be better than a first-round pick. So I think when you're the playoffs, whether they're going to go a series or two is not worth, risking what you could get for Kaprizov. Yeah. So I think it would probably get done. The one thing, Alex touched on is, what team would he go to? He'd want to go to a winner, right? But also, there's only a couple teams in the league that can afford $16-17 million a year. So it's not a big. So obviously, he has to have his ducks in a row in terms of, hey, if I'm not going to sign this deal in Minnesota, what are the teams that would give me that type of contract, and then let that play out.
That might benefit Minnesota too, though, because if you've got to trade them and another team wants them, they might give up a high expensive player that's a good player because they want the cap to work to get Kaprizov. And you might, like Dallas, for example. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but Dallas says, we want Kaprizov and we'll make it work. We'll give you Jason Robertson. Well, if you're Minnesota, I mean, I got a 40-goal scorer back in return. It's not Kaprizov, but it's something. But that's how the salary cap would make it work.
But this is when the agent becomes so important, right? Because the agent for Kaprizov has to play this absolutely perfectly to get his client whatever it is that his client is after, whether it be the money, the location, or a combination of the two. He's probably outside of Kaprizov producing, he's probably one of the most important people in this conversation, right?
Yeah, definitely. And if I'm not mistaken, please don't hold me to this because I haven't read.
No, we do that here on Last Minute Blues podcast. What you say is the Bible.
Any changes is, I believe his agent is the same guy who was Tarasenko's agent when he requested the trade to go to leave the Blues, if he hasn't changed in the past.
That worked out well.
Yeah. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Well,
that gives you better vibes, doesn't it, Donny?
Here's the best part about everything in which that we've talked about. at least for me anyway.
The season's starting.
Hockey is freaking back.
Amen to that.
Freaking back. I'm so excited. All right. So Last Minute Blues podcast, we're wrapping this up, but we want to thank our sponsor. It's brought to you by Blue Note Roofing, siding, and gutters. Your St. Louis roofing experts. Visit BlueNoteRoofingSTL.com for a free inspection. Always a big shout out to our video and sound crew that put together the podcast. I never thank them, and they're amazing. Yep. And so thank them for making us look as good as we can. Alex Ferrario from 101 ESPN, Jeremy Rutherford from The Athletic. I'm Donny Fandango. We so much appreciate you listening to the Last Minute Blues podcast. Tell your friends that love hockey, and as always, let's go Blues.
The Last Minute Blues podcast. Hear more at 1057thepoint.com.